All right, Dr. Dave,
Nice to
welcome to
meet
the
you.
Secret Sesh.
Yeah, I'm excited. It's good to quote video meet you, and hopefully we will have a chance to do it in person someday.
Absolutely, you're gonna have to tell me who your haberdashery is. I'm digging the shirt.
So that actually definitely fits into one of my personal great moments. It was a recent Christmas present from my 18-year-old daughter.
Oh, nice.
So who is highly amused by she doesn't know all the details of my whole life of cannabis, but my life, especially professional life of cannabis, is pretty public the last 5, 6, 7 years. So she's found that completely amusing, and so she buys me cannabis gifts. She bought me a poster and this shirt for Christmas. So I enjoy it thoroughly. So definitely had to bring it out for this occasion.
Oh, that's amazing. And I want to backtrack and say hasher dabbery. Uh, I
Just
missed a
flipping.
that was a double pun right there. So and I will let everyone know, but I'll get it from you in details. You are bringing cannabis into the world of academia, and I think that's so fascinating. But as you know, and viewers will find out right now, I have had a super long day of high pressure calls and proofreading, and so I gotta get this secret sesh to its sesh point right now. If you're
Absolutely. Well,
prepared.
I will power on. I am a dryer vape guy these days.
Nice. And of course, everyone out in the greater GMIWH the Great Moments in Weed History podcast universe, please join us.
By all means.
And yeah, I want to kind of get right into that because it's to me fascinating, long overdue, something I'm excited about in general, and then here specifically what you're doing. But what is the class that you're teaching, and how did you get there?
Yeah, well, the official title of the class is Public Health and Cannabis Use. That was the title that was kind of given by the university. The title I kind of use is the intersection of cannabis and public health. And really, that brings in that you can't talk about public health without talking about the effects of prohibition and mass incarceration, which, at least in my conclusion, was far more significant to the public health than any form of cannabis consumption or legalization. So I kind of wanted to make sure to include that aspect. So it's not really just public health and cannabis use, but really that intersection.
Oh, absolutely. And, we're like talking to the choir's choir in some ways here. Although, some people are very new to the subject that listen to this show. So I think that's such an important point. There's, okay, are there health risks to using cannabis? Absolutely, as there are health risks to many, many things, including vigorous exercise has its health risks. So, not diminishing that, not downplaying it, but, obviously, greatly overblown. And when you compare it to the health benefits for so many people, that's one side of the debate. And then, as you say, to talk about harms and cannabis and not talk about people being arrested, families being torn apart, communities being torn apart, people going to prison, I could tell you firsthand, all of those things are really bad for your health. So I appreciate you bringing a comprehensive view to it. How did you end up? Was that an idea that you generated, or they were looking for somebody to teach a class like that?
Yeah, bits and pieces. So the Community College of Denver wanted to create cannabis degree programs. Obviously, it's a large industry here in Colorado. And they wanted to create a program that could help siphon folks into that industry, but with an educational background. So the idea to create that program came from, I think, the former president, and I got connected with them by, I think, a nurse group that I work with, and kind of sat in on some meetings, gave some kind of input when they were kind of creating the program, creating the classes and whatnot, but didn't really have much role. And then at one point they were like, okay, well, who kind of, we're going to hire who wants to, teach these and actually design the actual classes based on, some rough course objectives. So I took that on, had a little bit of help at the beginning, and then mostly just created this course and one other course just kind of out of thin air. And the other course hasn't launched yet. This one, just started this semester. And so it was kind of took a year or so to really put it all together. Of course, kept tinkering and whatnot. But it's really a combination. I mean, it's a history journey a little bit. So, again, including some of the history of cannabis consumption, both medically and socially or spiritually, and then into the prohibition era and the criminalization, and then the war on drugs, and then it definitely is now transitioning. We're kind of in the middle now, transitioning into those health effects, and looking at it from a variety of perspectives, and then we'll finish up talking about the industry a bit, and kind of the future and regulations and harm reduction and kind of things like that. So it just kind of evolved and really got connected just through my work in the medical cannabis space. People kind of push things my way, and that's kind of where I'm at career wise. I just kind of these days do what comes my way that seems interesting to me, and so I have the flexibility to take this on.
That's fascinating. Okay, I want to hear about your background in medical cannabis prior to the class, but first I have to ask, as a teacher of a class in cannabis, have any of your students given you an apple pipe?
No one has given me an apple pipe. No, and so next Wednesday when I see them, I will tell them they have all been docked for because that idea was brought up and they had not successfully taken that on their own.
Now, I don't know how. Oh, I don't know if that's a reference that dates me. It feels like a reference to like the 1920s when an apple was probably a more prized thing to have, but it was like kind of the classic stereotypical way to suck up to the teacher. You give the teacher an apple, and you were, I guess, what's not too PC to call a brown noser anymore, but that's
yeah,
the term.
Definitely. But on the flip side, an apple a day supposedly keeps the doctor away, which would be potentially counterintuitive at this point of me staying away. So.
Absolutely. And of course, the beauty of the apple pipe is, it's available anywhere apples are available. You can eat the evidence. And, don't smoke weed out of a soda can, please. I hope nobody listening to this is doing that, but an apple is a far better alternative. So you mentioned having a background with medical cannabis, going into this class. Tell me about that.
Yeah, well, I'm an internal medicine doc. I was a primary care doctor, and I was always kind of quickly into just what you would call broadly the integrative medicine space. I went into practice, just plain old primary care internal medicine practice. And after a year or two, I kind of, to oversimplify, figured out almost everything I was taught didn't really work that well. So I kind of spent the rest of my career figuring out better tools. So, but in cannabis wise, I was certainly comfortable with non-traditional, types of medicine. But when dispensaries in Colorado opened up in 2010, I had patients that were coming to me like, "Hey, can you do my med card? I want to, to use this legally," and I get some information from them. And after doing a handful, I was like, "Oh, I should probably know more about this if I'm authorizing their medical use." And I've been a cannabis consumer since forever. I mean, adolescence, and so for me, it's always been this huge part of my life, but I'd never like thought about it in the context of my professional world. My professional world was always hiding it, and you know, there was a lot of fear about exposure there. So I just never really put them together, other than, you know, I recognized some positives that it helped me with. But so, anyways, in 2010, that's when I kind of started learning about the endocannabinoid system. I was just blown away by, hey, here's all this science no one ever taught me. So just kind of poured through all that, and was primarily, you know, with the patients in my primary care practice, doing cards as it came up, but it was still kind of a minor thing, mainly again because I didn't really want to talk about it personally, so I kind of just kept
When
it.
you say doing cards, just writing recommendations for people that would allow them to access what at the time there were only medical cannabis
Exactly.
dispensaries, and so just kind of to
Yeah,
fill that
yeah,
detail in.
to fill that in. Yeah, exactly. That was in Colorado. That was the only way you could get cannabis legally, and so that was still a small piece, but I kept my learning up and really continued to gain insight. And then I closed my main practice in early 2018, uh, and with no plan of what to do, kind of still there with no plan of what I'm doing. As I said, things just come up and I kind of say yes. But a couple of things that started coming up right after I closed was uh, doing kind of more cannabis medical certifications. And so I was doing more of those. And then it kind of went into started doing some talks and lectures as those popped up, doing some consulting. And so various things within cannabis now really have exploded since, say, like 2018, even though it's been kind of part of my scientific lexicon, you know, even going back, God, I guess almost 15 years now, 13 years.
Yeah, wow. And I really, this is when we talk about the propaganda campaign against cannabis, often what first comes to mind for people are old reefer madness headlines from the 30s. You know, you're going to smoke weed and turn into an axe murderer, or not you, but the wrong kind of people are, you know, just
Yeah.
the racism and the overt lies of it all. But underneath that, the still ongoing to this day propaganda campaign against doctors and the medical profession is just shocking, because I know for a fact that you can graduate from a top medical school today and not hear a single word in your education about the endocannabinoid system, which I feel like I'm a good summarizer. So let me summarize and then we'll talk. Is an underlying system throughout your body with receptors that fit cannabinoids, THC, and other compounds found in cannabis, CBD, like a lock and a key. And this system regulates the function of all the other systems in your body. It's like the root operating system of a computer. And that is why cannabis is an effective treatment for such diverse, seemingly unconnected types of conditions, from chronic pain to MS to nausea. How can one thing have these vastly different positive responses? Insomnia, trauma, all the things that we know. And it is because it's operating at this root level system. And yet, we are today churning out another generation of doctors who literally do not know that this exists. And what's been your experience with that? Like, and from the other side of it, I'm assuming you probably, what year did you graduate from medical school, and was that at all a part of your education?
No, no, certainly not mine. Never heard a word. I graduated med school in 2000, and there was still plenty of information. The endocannabinoid system kind of figured out at least the core of it between like 88 and 94 ish or so. So by 96 to 2000, it could have been mentioned for sure. But even still, my experience is it's still mostly non-existent. I mean, the last some of the last numbers I've seen are a little bit old now, like 27, 2018, but it was like 15%, even mention the endocannabinoid system. But I give talks once in a while at one of the medical schools outside of Denver. And last time I was there, I asked them, is it mentioned at all? And they're like, pretty much not at all. And even cannabis as medicine is not mentioned. Still, cannabis is mostly just mentioned in a talk on substance abuse or things like that. Every so often, it'll get mentioned under talking about pain or something. But that's school dependent. There are schools, thankfully, on the medicine side that have much more robust, I've heard at different places, and those are often places where people have been doing positive cannabis, research. And so there are pockets where students are getting a better education. But as I used to use a line in some of my lectures, just by the time, just sitting through one lecture of mine for an hour, you will know more about cannabis and the endocannabinoid system than literally every physician in the United States of America. And we just literally get no training. And then once you've, completed, you have to actively go find that training, and that costs money, and it's not on any board certification tests or anything. So it's not you have to really be motivated to get that education.
And one of the terrible byproduct of this, this is attuned to training somebody to be, obviously the human body is vastly more complicated and important, just as a metaphor. An auto mechanic and saying, the drive shaft doesn't exist.
Yeah.
It's dirty and bad. And so we won't tell you about it. And the way this filtered out to society is I cannot tell you the number of people. The only thing that's different about my experience is having had these kind of encounters with so many people about I have gotten cancer X or Y or Z, and I've heard in the ether that this might be helpful. And if you're the out public weed person, the friend of the friend is going to put you in touch with the people. And the number of people who just said, well, my doctor said, don't do it. Not even my doctor said, well, I don't know shit about this. But my doctor would presume to tell me, and okay, the endocannabinoid system, it's not something you can see or touch or tell or witness. It exists.
Or test for. There's really no clinical lab testing for it. So,
but the secret that weed will help you with nausea from chemotherapy has been out since the 1970s, when there was a double-blind study. That's how Marinol got to be prescribable for that. Marinol is just 100% THC, synthetically derived. So, I'm sorry. It's this is supposed to be I brought some like work stuff in, but this is something at my core. I have wept over people who could have benefited so much from cannabis, and because of this very thing, this institutionally imposed ignorance over doctors, has had just such a huge impact on people's lives. Let me hold on. Let me get puffing again, and we'll bring it. Yeah. I'll get high and a little off my high horse, and we'll bring it back to having a fun sesh level.
That's what I got it out of my system. It's no, it's true, and there's a spectrum. Thankfully, and I'm probably just as much on the pessimist side of things as well. But I would say in that spectrum, like there's people like myself who actively educate and guide people about how to incorporate cannabis into their lives. And at the other end of the spectrum, you have doctors who are downright verbally abusive to their patients for even bringing up cannabis. obviously there's a lot of folks in between, and a lot of people are this, well, I don't know anything about it. But, you know, the one thing I will say, there is definitely a shift from the downright abusive doctor to, I don't know anything about it, but fine with me, to, oh, hey, teach me about it, to, hey, oh, actually, yeah, I think it's a good idea. Let me refer you to Dr. Dave. So there is that shift. I think the tough part is that the medical community lags farther than just about any other institution. And that's why when you look at cannabis education, where we started, there is a significant, you could even call it exponential growth over the last 4 years of education programs in undergraduate or master's level. So that's nice to see. But yeah, actual academic medicine is very much, lagging. There's obviously increasing folks in it, but it's so there is positive, there's movement, but like anything, it's not moving fast enough, and it's tough. As I said, I was a kind of integrative functional medicine doc my whole career, so after 27 years of this, you throw cannabis in the mix, it gets a little bit exhausting having to kind of argue for just how you live and practice, and what I feel is a far significant better than the mainstream. So it gets a little tiring, and that frustration
it's pretty hard
there.
It's pretty hard to be nice about it and get shit on. And that's been the weed experience all around. You think of, I don't want to get off on another high horse or rant or whatever, but like when you think of movements in our society that are taking, what started out at least as a pretty radical position, it's just been a nonviolent, grassroots, argue the facts. There's been some real, off-putting characters associated with weed like anything else, but in general, we've just kind of been like, we know we're right.
Yeah, and it's tough. I'll say two things. One, I'll say one thing that's serious, and then I can definitely link some humor into medicine in cannabis, or at least medical training in cannabis. But the one thing, I was going to say, for me, it is, I do find that challenge because I, have those same views that just someone whose cannabis has been important to, and who continues to learn about it through your work and through the work of others. I have this knowledge of, wow, you guys really are just mean to cannabis. And then on the flip side, now I have this like very professional, active role, medical role, where I can't just be a stoner, as much as I would like to. But so I have to talk about its risks, and I have to even buffer some of its, it cures this, or it treats this, because, there's different levels of evidence and whatnot. But so it's definitely a balance that I struggle with, because I have to keep those two caps on, so to speak. And so that's an interesting area to be in.
Yeah, absolutely. And it occurs to me, I would love to do a quick shout out for the late and truly great Dr. Lester Grinspoon. You can listen to our episode of Great Moments in Weed History. Please do, if you haven't. Just why it's relevant. He was associate professor at Harvard Medical School. His best friend was Carl Sagan. He went into the medical library one day to dig up the evidence to show his friend Carl why he needed to stop smoking so much weed, because it was terrible. And he emerged from the library 2 days later saying, "This is all bullshit. Cannabis is an incredible medicine, and certainly the case against it is full of lies," and became, not just a central leading figure in the legalization movement, but in the movement to educate doctors and to really helped create some of the first studies. It's a beautiful and touching story. I'd go listen to it if you haven't, please. But
I agree. Thumbs up. It's a solid episode. Solid episode. Plus, Carl Sagan I've always loved Carl Sagan. Read a lot of his stuff, so it was nice. Yeah, it's a solid episode.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you. And so tell me about the students in your class. Are they like in the 18 to 22 range? Does it go all over the board? And what are people like looking to get out of the class?
Yeah, it's the age range is wider. I don't know exactly, but I would say typical college age probably as high as, certainly I would bet early to mid 40s is probably, up there. And there's my class just has 7
So
students.
all young people.
Agree. Well, yeah, I have crossed a large barrier this past summer in big round numbers. So definitely younger than me. But so there's a range, and they're folks who know they want cannabis to be part of their professional life. They have different individual goals, and some don't completely know. Some want to potentially be on the cultivation side in the cannabis industry. Some want to have businesses and figuring out what might work. So they're all folks who want cannabis to be part of their professional lives, ranging in age. So some already working, changing careers, some, using this to start their college education. And we have 2 degree programs. One's an associate's and one's a bachelor's, even though it's community college, which I didn't know bachelor's you get at community college, but apparently you can. But they're so interested. I mean, that's the coolest thing. They just so want to know more about cannabis. I mean, they mostly have known through their personal or just what's transmitted through social media or the media they've consumed in their lives, and so they just want to know more, and especially a lot of the health effects, how things work in the body, the endocannabinoid system. They just want as much of that. They want to inhale as much of that as possible. Since I'm in the presence of the king, I figure I should throw one in.
I see what you did there. What I think is interesting as well when you say in professional life. We talk about weed culture a lot, and we touch on the weed industry on this show. And for anybody who's not aware, just generally, these big corporate weed plays are going down left and right. And I don't celebrate people losing their jobs who work there. And I don't judge them. Maybe if you own it and you're an asshole, but certainly if you're the bud tender at some corporate place, I'm not looking down my nose at you at all. And I'm sorry, to anybody who lost their job because of this. But what I am looking at with some hope is we want people coming into this because they've been called to by the plant. And when you describe to me a room full of students who want to know more and want to know more about the aspects of it that aren't necessarily going to be how they're going to monetize that knowledge. Right. And I just, 5-8 years ago, I would, occasionally be called upon to talk at like business conferences and stuff. And I tell you what, don't shout down capitalism at every turn if you want to get invited back to business conferences. But the eyes that look back at me, yes, there were people there who were called to the plant, but I also just saw the blank shark, predatory, and no offense to sharks, stare of this is money. There's going to be money. I'm here because this is how I'm going to fucking get rich. And I think that people are starting to get dissuaded from the idea that that this industry is certainly any different than any other. Go do something else. And the flip side of that is to look out at a classroom full of people who are, actively seeking that knowledge out is just really heartening to me about what the future of this culture is going to be like.
Yeah, that part has been the best. I mean, this is my first foray into formal academics. I've given plenty of talks and lectures, but grading stuff and creating curriculum, and not surprisingly, the best part is these interactions with the students. Again, because they're just so wanting to learn, and like you said, there are people all who would love to have an income in their lives, as we all do, but it's more, I want to learn about this, and then I'll find a way to make it work with my interest. And I think that part is growing. Like I said, we have this program here, and I have 7 in my class, but I think we have some of the classes that are more preliminary, non-electives, are already in the 20 to 30 person range, I think, for a number of students. So growing just at our small community college, there's popping up in other institutions. There's, I was part last spring, and I'll be part this spring, a cannabis curriculum convening where a bunch of folks working in this space talk about, what's working for you, what are you guys talking about?
Wow,
that's organized out of Stockton University in New Jersey. I know you're from New Jersey. Actually, I have no idea where Stockton University is, but I know it's in Jersey.
You want to know something? I think it's in South Jersey. What time of year?
It's April. I can certainly send you the information.
That's interesting. I might be out in Jersey. We'll figure that out. But
it's on Zoom anyways.
It's on Zoom. Well then
it's just a free Zoom conference thing. So
well, that's really interesting. I interviewed somebody for an article that hasn't come out yet. That have a cannabis studies program now at what used to be Humboldt State University, and now is Humboldt Poly, or what, I forget the exact new name, but we have a supporter of this show on Patreon who is in a degree program in Maryland. So it's definitely growing, and it's like very, very needed. I think people really, the genesis of this show and choosing to look at history is because if you don't seek this history out, it's not to be found. And there's this counter history. And now, there's all aspects of an education. But in essence, if you really don't know the history of something, you presumably only know what happened in the last 5 seconds. And that makes you very vulnerable to disinformation. It makes you, I speak of people, who, I have a friend who works at a dispensary and says the turnover rate is about 40% a month or something for entry-level dispensary workers. And it's because they've made it not fun and not about weed. And so I feel like people are showing up to these entry-level jobs with the love of weed and understandably maybe not the deep knowledge. And you walk into an environment that you think is going to nurture that love. Like if you were going to work at a candy shop, like not Snickers and stuff, but we make candy here. You'd expect the people to love candy. You'd expect to learn about candy every day. But it's so many of the retail operations, which is the real entry level job for people.
Yeah,
they're corporate, consumer packaged goods.
Yeah, like you said, there's this industry where the reality is, especially places like Colorado where there's corporate takeout. I mean, the people who run the things are kind of still mostly corporate, and their priority isn't the plant on any level. I bet you dispensaries that are still kind of owned and run by people who kind of started from the grass. So like, well, you had Wanda James on your show
Mhm.
recently, obviously a staple here in Colorado. I would bet turnover at her dispensary is probably lower because the people that kind of run it top down, like any job, it's how the people at the top prioritize things, and if the people at the top just prioritize revenue, you know, it's an annoying company, in my opinion. And cannabis, I think, is no different.
Yeah, go do that somewhere else. Wanda James, of course, was one of the earliest dispensary owners with her husband in Colorado, and before that, an integral part of the legalization campaign there. And you can listen to the episode with her is the one about the 10-year anniversary of legalization in Colorado. It wasn't too long ago. And I guess just to round the thought out, like I think working in a dispensary is a fine job. I would say look for one that feels the way about weed that you do, but I would recommend for people as well, if you want to make a career out of this, particularly if you're younger than me, just because you have more time and it's easier to try new things. A formal education in cannabis will go a long way on paper in distinguishing you from other people, but also in knowledge and experience, because this knowledge and experience is still at a premium. It's still somewhat hidden underground knowledge just coming up to light. And the other thing is get involved with activism and activists. And if you live in a place where weed has long been legal, that's going to look very different locally than trying to get legalization. But no one's doing weed right. So there's always issues to work on. And I would say, academia is a place where you can absorb that knowledge and meet like minded people and have something that on paper is going to say to a prospective employer, your skills and your knowledge. And activism is going to, you know, get you right in the mix of being involved in the culture, and the culture certainly includes the industry. At this point, I would say putting your professorial hat on for a sec. What do you think? What would you advise to somebody who wanted to make? I think for a younger person it's easier, but if for somebody who's been in a career for a while and they're looking to make that change, how do you find the right kind of academic program?
That's a good question. I think a lot of it starts with, like you said, someone's already at a point where I want to make a change, and cannabis maybe is already important to me, so I want that part of the change. I think second piece is you have to realistically look at where you're at in the world, what kind of time you have, and things of that nature. If you're just like, wow, I want to know more, or maybe I'm going to switch jobs and I'm going to get that entry level job, but I want to learn more alongside it. I mean, there's a lot of short classes that you can find where it's like completely online, web driven, where it's 1 to 4 hours, self-guided, where you can learn about a quick overview of the history and the messaging and the endocannabinoid system and therapeutic roles, side effects, just kind of a big snapshot. There's a variety of those. There's one I've helped with called Medical Cannabis Mentor. That's a great one. And then there are several others out there. And then if you have more time or you just want something more dedicated, yeah, I mean, community college is a great place. I mean, that's not been a part of my academic life. I just went to traditional 4-year school. But like, for example, my class right now, it's actually even being taught on an accelerated model. So we're doing a 15-week semester in 7.5 weeks. So you could literally take 2 months of your life and be like, well, I'm busy, but 2 months and I can dedicate, you know, 10 hours a week to education, or, or somewhere in that range. And there's a model like that where you can do it, and do something more intense, or if you can take. So I think it's it's finding how much time you have, and that there's enough to do every time slot. There's just, I have a weekend, I'm going to learn something, to I have a couple months, I'm going to do, a formal course, to I'm going to take 2 years off and just get formal training with a bachelor's or a master's, or, things of that nature. So I think it's really first dig in and be like, how much time do I have to commit? And then there's options in all those areas, thankfully.
All right. Well, yeah, I think that's great advice, and I think, you know, I think by the time we get down to people listening to minute 20 whatever of the secret sesh, uh, they're probably, finding out lots of things about weed all over the place. But, I think that anybody, it surprises me sometimes, people who smoke weed every day and just have, but I can think of myself like, how much did I think about coffee until 2 years ago? Something that I drink every day. Not that much. And then now, you learn quite a bit about it. Colorado has had legal weed longer than anywhere else in the U.S. fully, in terms of
Adult use, yeah.
dispensary access. What you puffing on? What's good? How are prices? And how has it changed in the last 10 years?
So interesting. So one aspect of that, I don't know, because with the pandemic, we had a couple empty veggie boxes in 2020 after we planted our garden. And so I said, hey, I've never grown cannabis before. I should do that. So I bought a couple clones. And over the last, whatever, 3 summers now, I've grown, I don't know, 50 ounces of cannabis. So, and I'm a lightweight. Even when I consume regularly, I'm still lightweight. So I haven't purchased flower once all at a dispensary. So tonight I'm using some of the homegrown that is labeled Sour Joker. It has nice, definitely uplift. Had some citrus. Had almost a little apple maybe to it. And I mixed it with a little of your recently mentioned Pine Walker OG from Tweedle Farms. Probably about 2 to 1 the high THC stuff, and 1/3 the Tweedle Farms CBD. And so that's I'm usually rotating between various Tweedle Farms stuff and then stuff I've grown over the last 3 years. But I do know enough about dispensaries. The biggest change has been, sadly, more of a sad thing, the just decimation of the medical dispensaries. Like 90+% of cannabis sold is in rec, and it's there are some pretty amazing products that come out, but the innovation tends to be more in edibles or concentrates, just plain old flower. It's all very, very, very high THC flower. Last time I went to a dispensary, I was just looking at the menu. Everything was over 30% in the entire dispensary, which
Yeah.
I just don't find necessary. And I think, as you guys have attested to it in another past episode talking about the cannabis cup, and there's even a study that came out looking at that THC content does not correlate with enjoyment or benefits or pleasure in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, what you're referring to is the Emerald Cup, which is
Emerald Cup,
to me the most prestigious contest. And they have the hard data. They have not just the THC percentage on every flower that's entered, but all the cannabinoids and the terpenes. And there's no correlation between elevated THC. Nothing's going to win if it's 3% THC or 9% THC. But what has been consistently winning is not the highest THC, but the highest terpene content, the loudest, the smelliest, the stinkiest, because that's the flavor and the effect. So that's interesting. And I want to say congratulations on your self-sufficiency and really I'm going to save this for a different sesh. But the way that we're going to change the cannabis industry into what we want is one, buying weed that we want to see, smoke the weed you want to see in the world. So if you're buying it, know where it comes from. What's the farm like? Is that what you feel good about? Are they growing it in a way that you feel good about? And slash, if you can grow it yourself, you're doing two things. You're making yourself self-sufficient. Now, not everybody has that opportunity, even when it's legal. I totally understand that, whether it is not having the room indoors or outdoors, not having the resources to start indoors, not having the space, whatever it may be. But if you can, you are growing tax-free, off the books weed. The more of that there is, you can give it away. Right? Like, think about the description of how much you grew. You can give it away. So you are decommodifying the plant by doing that. If lots of people are growing way more than they need and giving it away, or even selling it at prices that are so low it's like giving it away, then how much can they charge for it in the store? And particularly if it's not that great. And I think, just tell me if I'm wrong, but I believe, and I'm going to light one up to sesh out with everybody. And thank you for listening. And, thank you so much for taking the time to sesh with me, and for supporting the show. Is the weed that you grow yourself the greatest weed on earth?
Of course. Of course. And it's just beautiful, like any plant, to see it start small and grow big. And whether it's the zucchini or the cucumbers we're growing, or the chilies or the cannabis, just to go out to your yard and have it there and know that there's that one piece of self-sufficiency in that whole world of my 9 Amazon deliveries that are coming, and that there's that one piece. So it really has been a beautiful addition, and I've had the luxury of smoking it, vaporizing it. I've made oils. This summer, my buddy was out for my 50th, my old school friend from LA, where I grew up, college friend, and we did a whole infused day of meals. So our own personal bon appetit I made 7 different meals, all infused with my own homemade oil, with a little bit of Tweedle Farms as well. But
good idea.
But so just it's beautiful when it's your own, and you're right, everybody doesn't have the resources, but it's amazing. Something called weed with just water and sun does really well.
Yeah, so look at that corner of the yard, or whatever space you might have, particularly
following all local laws, of course, as a professional in this industry.
And I'll just say, don't get caught. And never take a risk without understanding the risk that you're taking. So you need to know the law if you want to step outside it. Don't blunder into risk that you might not be aware of.
Wise words.
Dr. Dave?
I will pass that on to my children.
Yes, please do. And Dr. Dave, thank you so much. This is sort of the pilot program sesh of the secret seshes. The one I recorded with Keith was a long time ago. I can't tell you how great I'm feeling about this decision to make the seshes real seshes. I have absolutely enjoyed this conversation. I'm thrilled with the work that you're doing, both in the medical field and in the academic field. I'm heartened to hear about a room full of people eager for knowledge about this plant. And half a J into this sesh, I've left a hectic and at times very frustrating day behind. So what more can you ask for from a sesh? And I will see you, Dr. Dave, and all the rest of you next Weedness Day.
Well, thank you for doing this. I can't wait to hear about what the other listeners are doing in their world as well, and looking forward to this week's episode that I haven't listened to yet.
Salud. All right. Well, hi everybody.
L'chaim.
L'chaim. And see you next Weedness Day. Thanks, Dr. Dave.